We all know the famous words of the Mesilas Yesharim, how he starts off his first chapter. Yesod HaChasidus v'shoresh ha'avoda, the foundation of piety and the root of serving Hashem is to know ma chayvasai be'olamai, what is my obligation in this world. And when the Mesilas Yesharim describes our obligation in this world, he tells us why we were created. And he says, Lihisaneg al Hashem ulahanois miziv shchinasai, to have pleasure from Hashem and to enjoy his presence, his shchinah. And the question that we could ponder is that pleasure in this world, or is that pleasure in the next world? There's a Gemara in Menachos that brings a story of a student of Rav Chia that wanted to see a certain Zoina, harlot. And he had to travel the ocean to see her. This woman took 400 gold pieces as payment. And he sends the payment and it goes to see her across the ocean, and he comes to her mansion of a house. And the guards tell her the student who paid to be with you is here, and they let him in. And this woman had 7 beds of silver, one of gold. And she goes up, and he goes up to be with her. And suddenly, his tzitzis hit him in the face. And he thinks about the mitzvah of tzitzis and the principle of the mitzvah of tzitzis. And it reminds him of Hashem. And he goes down. And the woman tells him and says, I will not let you leave this house until you tell me what the problem is. Am I not beautiful? And he tells her, the beauty you definitely are, but the mitzvahs of tzitzis reminded me of who I am. And this woman took down his name and the name of the yeshiva that he learned in. And she went to Rav Chia and she said, I want to convert to Judaism. And she told Rav Chia the story. And she ended up marrying this student. And the Gemara quotes the same beds that she was going to make in a forbidden manner. Now she is making for him in a permitted manner. He paid 400 gold pieces to be with her. Now her riches became his. When we think about the reward, the Gemara tells us, the reward for our mitzvahs are in this world. In Olam Haba, how much more so? I want to conclude with a fascinating story that I heard. There was a Yid, Rav Yosef Kamenetsky. Rav Yosef Kamenetsky was responsible for many, many religious schools and day schools in America. And when he was nifter and his children were sitting shiva, a man walked in to the shiva, to the mourning house, to show respect. And he told the children, he said, you don't know who I am, but I want to tell you a fascinating story about your father. He said, when I was growing up, I grew up in a house that was not religious. But my father traditionally wanted me to still get a religious education, so he sent me to a religious day school. And growing up in that day school, I was learning different halachot. And one morning, I'm waking up, I'm trying to go to school, and there's the halacha of how you're supposed to tie your shoes. That you're supposed to first tie the left and then the right. And I realized I tied my shoe the wrong way that I was taught in day school. So I had to retie my shoes. In the interim, my dad is waiting for me. He's like, Sam, where are you? And I said, I'm coming. And finally, I walked down the steps, and his father says, what took you so long this morning? So I told him, I said, I learned in day school, you got to tie your shoes a certain way. And I tied it the wrong way, so I wanted to retie it. So my dad looked at me, and he was furious, and he said, this is what you're learning in day school? How to tie shoes? That's what I'm paying tuition for? So he said, I'm done. Enough of this. You're going back to public school. As the story goes, as I fell further and further away from religion, it comes the day of my wedding that I fell so much that I'm ready to marry a non-Jewish girl. And the day of the wedding comes, and I'm getting ready for the wedding, and I tie my shoe in the morning, and a thought suddenly hits me. And I realize all these years there is one halacha, one law that I've been keeping, tying my shoes correctly. If I have held on to this one halacha, how am I ready to break away from everything tonight? And I was pacing back and forth, and finally I made the decision, I just can't. And I called her and I said, I can't, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm calling off the wedding. And obviously she's devastated, and she tried to talk to me, and I said, it's not about you. I'm a Jewish boy, and a Jewish boy, I cannot go through with this. After breaking off the wedding, I realized that I must learn more about religion, and I went to study in a kiruv yeshiva, and I started to learn, and eventually, after a couple of years, my yeshiva came over to me, and he said, you know what, it's really time for you to get married. And not only that, there was this girl I met recently, and I would like to set you up on a date with her. And I said, okay, but he said, I want to mention she happens to be a giyorish, she's a convert. Is that something that would bother you? So I said, no, I'm fine with that. That's okay. So I go on this date, and I'm waiting for the girl, and I wouldn't believe my eyes that the girl who walks in is the girl that I was going to marry a few years before. And I ask her, and I tell her, tell me the story, what happened with you? And she tells me, she said, when we were dating a few years back, and somebody, for the person he cares about and wants to marry, is ready to give that up for his religion, I felt I need to be part of that. And to bring that back to the lesson that we have, yes, we do not give up anything for keeping halacha. Hashem will reward us in this world, but in the next world, how much more so?